Hello. Today, I am so happy to introduce you to Marcia Brees, a publishing consultant whose work I know well since she helped me for a few times, in publishing books through Writing It Real. And then she ended up being the production manager, which meant book designer, for Ex Ophidia Press, which published my most recent book. It has been a delight to work with you, Marcia, and I'm so excited about introducing you to others. I'll tell you just a little bit about Marcia, and you'll get the nuances and swing of it really soon. Marcia is a person who has a long background in software and in writing. She's published novels. She's got one with an agent now, and she's happily and enthusiastically working on another one. We envy her because she's got a very busy day job being what she calls a publishing partner. That's the name of her business. She helps those who want to self publish, and in some cases, small presses, do the work that's incurred in designing a book. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So, welcome, Marcia, who's, by the way, has a website called www.marciabrees.com. Okay, Marcia, hello and welcome. And I
Hi,
guess
Sheila.
my very first question has to be, what is a self-publishing consultant?
Okay, that's what I am. I don't like to call myself a publisher because it really helped people self-publish their books. So there's so many nuances to a self-published book. I call it drinking from a fire hose. There's so much to learn about publishing. And as a writer, I'd rather be writing than learning how to publish my book. But now I've done both. So I have turned it into a business, but it took a lot of time to learn all the nuances of self-publishing: cover design, interior design, distribution, ebooks, all
All
the
right.
things that go along with it.
I
That's
want
what we
to
can
break.
talk about. Yeah.
Right. That is what we're going to talk about slowly about each. People start with the question, why should I self-publish? Is it bad to self-publish? And I would like to just add, and you probably have things to add too, that in these times, it isn't bad if you come out with a professionally looking book. It is bad to self-publish if it doesn't look good. People are not going to think it is good. So we're going to talk a lot about what Marcia does to make a book look good and like something that you can trust for its information. What do you think, Marcia?
Yes, that's what I do. You start with the cover, and there's the old cliche: read a or you know a book by its cover. Well, I think it's more so now than it ever was before, because that thumbnail is on Amazon or wherever you buy your books online, and that thumbnail, you've got about 3 seconds to capture someone's attention before they move on. So that cover design has to really snap in a thumbnail size. And a lot of people don't think of that. They think about what it looks like on the shelf. And of course, that's important too. It's more important for it to be more effective online. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
well, it does, because if it's effective online, most likely it would be effective on the shelf.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So what makes it effective online?
Okay, there are, if you note, like if you go into a grocery store or Barnes and Noble, you'll notice that romance novels have a different kind of cover than, say, a business nonfiction cover, or a mystery, or whatever kind of novel it is, whatever genre it is. The cover will look different for each one. And if you design a cover that looks like a romance novel that's really a business book, you're going to attract the wrong target market, and they're not going to either buy it, or if they buy it, they won't like it because it isn't what they thought it would be.
Right.
So it's important for the cover to really represent what's inside.
So and I know you have worked with people who write memoir or poetry or less business but nonfiction.
Right.
What what do you think about? What do you start to think about when you're designing a cover for them?
Well, my first thing is to collaborate with them. What do they want to present to their reader that will target the market that they're after? And then sometimes I read the whole book, sometimes I read part of the book, and try to get a feel for what what's in the book, what the is going to draw the reader to that cover. That's where I start. And sometimes it's really interesting how you can nail it the first time. And then sometimes we go back and forth and have to fine tune. But I want to make sure that when we're done, that cover is what the author, they have to just love it. That's what we do.
Right, right, right. So you use the word collaborate with the author, and I think that's a really important function for people working with you, is that you have lots of ideas, lots of skill, lots of experience, but you listen to the writer,
Right,
and
right.
hopefully the writer listens to you.
Oh, yes, that's another aspect of the whole thing. I've had customers that wouldn't listen to me. They thought um, they considered themselves designers, or at least they thought they nailed it. And then when it doesn't sell, they're, what can I do? And it's, well, you didn't listen to me when I told you how to plan, how to, what to do with the cover. So it's, yeah, it's important to have a cover that's appropriate for the book.
Right. And a lot of us don't necessarily think about that yet as writers. We're writing the content.
Yeah. Yeah, we're too busy writing. And I
Yeah.
love the fact that I do both because I know what it's like to sit there and write. And you're not thinking about what the cover's going to look like. You're just writing. And that's what you should be doing.
Yeah, I agree. Especially as we get older and have less time to go through the
Yeah.
publishing production aspect of things. So it's one thing I want to say is that one one good reason to self-publish, and there are actually many. One is if you're getting older and you know that getting an agent, getting your book to a publishing house, getting that book produced is going to take years. You might consider how much more quickly self-publishing, if you're using a self-publishing consultant of high quality, like Marcia, is
Yeah.
going to take so much shorter period of time. The other thing that you're going to need to realize is even if you publish with a large, well-known publishing company, the time um, the time it's going to take you to support your own book once it's out there in the world is about the same.
That's what I
Unless you
hear.
are, yeah, unless you are Stephen King, unless you are somebody so famous that the publishing company has not only given you big advance, they have budgeted for a very big promotional uh, idea, strategy
Yeah. Yeah.
to support the author. Most of us get our book out with a smaller advance if it's with a company that gives advances, and then have to do all the legwork anyway. So it's important to have a good cover, for instance, and a good inside book design, which we're going to talk about next, so that when you are querying the places who might want to advertise your book, like writing press releases for papers or trying to get your book reviewed in journals in the right niche for you, or get it advertised on someone else's website, or even Amazon and Barnes and Noble and the places that other people that we use other than Amazon online to find out about books. The promotional material that you have to write and think about is just almost as time consuming. So
It is.
that
It is.
said, that I early on in the days of self-publishing, before there were people like you helping, um, it it was a crapshoot. People would self-publish and feel really disappointed in the reception of their book, but that's not true anymore.
Mm.
And not that it isn't really, really nice to share the responsibility with a publisher. It is really possible to take it on. So that said, let's move from the cover to the interior of the book.
Okay. Okay. The inside, I never thought, before I started doing this, I never thought about that books are designed on the inside. If a book is well designed, you don't even notice it. You read the book and you love it or you don't because of the content, not because of how it looks. And I always like to use the restaurant analogy, where if you go into a really fancy restaurant, and the tablecloth is clean and the music is nice and the ambiance is lovely, you kind of assume that the food will also be lovely. And then if you drop your fork, immediately somebody has given you a new fork and you didn't even know anybody was around. So it's not because the service is in your face. It's because the service is there and you don't know it. And that's the way it is with a cover design, or an interior design. The design is there, but it shouldn't be so obvious to the reader that it's distracting. It should support support the content of the book, whether it's fiction or nonfiction.
So a lot of elements go into
Oh
creating,
yeah.
and I know you've used the word that books have an
Yeah,
thank you. Anatomy,
anatomy,
right. Had to
anatomy
switch.
of a book.
Speaking about switching genres, I had to switch my brain to the science side. Anatomy, and I think that's a really interesting analogy as well. So tell us about the anatomy of a book
Right.
and what goes into making the proper anatomy in your design.
Well, there is front matter, the content, and back matter. And front matter is the copyright page, which is always on the left, and the table of contents, which always starts on the right. And then the first chapter, the first page of the first chapter is page number 1, and it is also on the right. If you're a self-publishing author and you're trying to do it yourself, a lot of authors will start number 1 on the inside cover page, and you don't want to do that. You don't. That's usually Roman numerals for the front matter, and then your page numbers start on the right side on the first page of the first chapter. Does that make sense?
That's the beginning of the
That's the
anatomy. Yeah.
beginning, yes. And then you have the content, chapter after chapter, if there are chapters. And in the end, we might have the acknowledgments, you might have an author, a bio of the author. Sometimes there's end notes, or there can be lots of different things in the end and the end or the back matter. So that's basically the anatomy of a book. But the pagination is really important. If you try to do it yourself and you don't get the pagination right, it just screams self-published, which still has a little bit of stigma. If it looks self-published, then people are going to kind of avoid it. But if it doesn't look self-published, they don't even know, because there are so many imprints out there now that most people
Right.
don't know the difference.
So while we're talking about the inside, you've used terms with me like gutter, margins, and I want to talk also about blank pages. Maybe we could
Oh yeah,
start with the blank pages. You've told us the order of the pages and where the
right,
numbering starts.
right.
But in working with you, I have learned that layout requires that you understand how many blank pages are necessary, how many are unnecessary, how many are in the way, what to do about it. So you want to talk about that a little, and then we'll go on.
Yeah, it's really important thing that jumps out as self-published. If you have a blank page in the content, you want it to be on the left, and that's fine. But there should be nothing on it, no page number, no header, nothing. It's just a blank page, and then your content is on the right. But if you're writing along and you have a blank page on the right, that's part of what I do, is make sure that doesn't happen, because you do not want a blank page on the right side. That's another clearly self-published mistake.
And is that strategy got something to do with the reader's eye, that it looks absent on the right but not on the left?
Well, we've been reading, all of us have been reading for a long time, and we know what the anatomy of a book is, even though we didn't ever call it that. And so if you come across a blank page, you think it's the end. That's,
Uh,
that's kind of what you think if it's on the right side. And it's awkward. There's something wrong. Our minds we don't like that. We want it to be organized properly.
right.
And you don't want your book to look self-published. You want it to look professional. So that's one of the things you want to avoid, is a blank page on the right side.
And that takes some finessing. It's not
Yeah,
necessarily an
that's
easy thing to do.
yeah, and that's where we come to the kerning, leading, and tracking. I can adjust the spaces between the words, between the sentences, and between the letters. So I use InDesign, and so sometimes the human eye can't see some of those changes. So I can adjust some of that so that the end shows up on the right place, the end of the page, or the end of the chapter ends up where you want it to.
And then how about how far in the margin is on the left?
Yeah, the gutter margin is real important. You want to make sure the bigger the book, the deeper the gutter margin needs to be. That's the inside where it opens up, where the glue is. And I've seen so many self-published books that the gutter was too narrow, and you have to pull the book apart in order to read comfortably.
Mm.
And you don't want the reader to have to do that. I think some people try to have as few pages as possible to pay for, but that is not the solution. You want
Okay.
to have a wide enough margin. Yeah.
So this is all what happens if a person, and you do have a menu of services. Some people just want a
Yeah.
cover design, some people want the
Right.
interior, some people want the whole deal, and we'll get on to more of your services. But if a person has no idea about all of this stuff, and and just has an idea they want their book to be gigantic or not fat, but tall or
Okay.
small, that's trim size,
Trim
right?
size. Yeah.
And how do you work with that?
Um, if you're working with a press, like the old traditional presses, they can do any size, any trim size you want, except that the printer will charge more for non-standard sizes. So what I do, and we'll talk about print on demand later, but when you order a print on demand book, you want to make sure it's one of the standards that Amazon or Ingram, which are the two distribution avenues that I use, that you're using a standard trim size for, that's not going to cost you a fortune, or that they can actually do. And then sometimes there are print or trim, excuse me, trim sizes that go with a certain genre. So you kind of want to watch out. Sometimes poetry books are a little smaller. Anything over 6x9 is probably a business book or a nonfiction. So that's kind of what I watch out
So
for.
that's a time to think about in the print version of your book, what shelf it's going to be on in a physical bookstore.
That's your genre. That goes back kind of to the cover design, and the your genre will determine where the book goes in the bookstore. That's a good thing to talk about for a minute, the genres. I have had customers who say, well, this is just for everybody, you know, and that, and that's true. There could be a book that appeals to both men and women and a large target market, but you want to make sure that you know where that book is going to be on the shelf. And even though it might be only online, it still needs to have a place, so that it falls into one of the genres of romance, mystery. There's a lot of them, but you want to make sure it falls into one of those genres. And that's true while you're writing as well as while you're designing.
Yeah. And then there's the whole market of children's books, which often
Uh,
have bigger
yeah,
sizes, right?
yeah. And those are bigger. Those are usually 8.5 by 11, or I forget what the standard trim size is for a children's book, but you still have to stay within the, if you're doing a self-published book in print on demand, then you still have to stay within a standard size,
Right.
trim size.
I like when you said it has to have a place, not only at
Yeah,
the bookstore, it has to have a place on your own personal shelves at home. And sometimes it's very annoying to find a book that doesn't actually fit.
right, right.
Um, okay. So we have talked now about a lot about the insides, but we haven't talked about pictures, illustrations, maps, other kinds of graphics. You do that kind of work too.
Oh yeah, that's my fun stuff to do. That's almost play. I love it. Um, I do it for cover design. I also do it with pictures that go on the inside. A lot of memoirs have images that are either damaged or not very clear. And sometimes I can use Photoshop and clear those up so that they are um, legible. They're not just blurry inside the memoir or the book.
So
Um,
you can maintain the agedness look of the
oh, absolutely. Oh,
yeah,
yeah. Usually we do um, black and white, and that's, I take those sepia images that are old, and if the book is black and white, then the picture has to be black and white, so I can change it from the sepia to black and white and still keep some of that feeling of it being an older picture.
You know, what if a person wants color? I think I have heard that if you have color anywhere in your book, you can have it as much as you want for the same price.
Yep, same price.
Is it very expensive?
Yes.
So people will avoid,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, there's a whole category. If all you want is your titles to be a color, then it's a color image. They don't change ink from page to page. They put it either in the press that has colored ink, or they put it in the press that has black and white ink, or
Mm.
black ink, obviously.
What about the
So
cover?
the way?
Can you have a color cover and then not incur the expense of the inside having
Oh,
color?
sure. Covers are almost always color.
Yeah.
It'd be very, I mean, I've done black and white covers, but there's no difference when you print them. But the
Okay.
interior, you can have different quality paper, different quality ink. Even in print on demand, you can choose what kind of quality you want, and that
Well,
gets expensive.
you brought it up. So
Print on demand.
let's talk about that for a minute, and then we'll go
Okay.
into the aspects of badly designed books.
Okay. Print on demand means that the book is printed only when there's an order. That's the general definition. So that if someone sends an order to Amazon to order your book and it's print on demand, Amazon prints it, wraps it up, and sends it out. They don't usually have, they might have one or two on the shelf if it's selling really well, but usually that's not the case for self-published books. But yeah, it's really cool. And this machine, it's called an espresso, and it does cover design, cover printing on the heavier paper, either gloss or matte, and it does the interior, either color or black and white. And the quality nowadays is really good. It's sometimes, unless you've got a real high quality press, like an art book or something, which you can't do on print on demand. Um, it's hard to tell the difference, and I think most readers wouldn't know the difference.
That's great. That's great news for a lot of
Yeah,
us. Yeah,
yeah.
thank you. Well, I think you've touched on the pitfalls of a badly designed book and what you've discussed with us, but is there anything you'd like to add?
Um, yeah, there's, I don't know. I think we covered it pretty well, but the thing is, you want it to look as professional as you can. And um, so to get somebody like me, there are book designers around, and you need to make sure you get somebody that can design that book so it looks as professional as possible. Um, I had a customer who designed his own cover, and he was so excited about it. And I was his consultant, so I suggested that he maybe find a cover designer for his book, not necessarily me, but somebody. And he said, no, I know what I'm doing. And he didn't sell any books. And then he came to me, and what can I do to sell my books? And I can't help you.
Yeah.
That's so,
Yeah.
yeah. And the other big pitfall is when it comes to distribution. Um, we talk about print on demand, and so you don't have a stack of books you're waiting to sell. The inventory gets printed as it's needed, which saves trees and ink and all that stuff. So you don't have to mail it out yourself. I had a customer who was so excited. I told him how much the print on demand charge would be, which included distribution, and he said that's twice what I can get at a foreign press or a foreign printer. And so he went ahead and ordered 5,000 books from a printer in Korea. And they were like really cheap. They were beautiful. There's nothing wrong with them. They were lovely. But then he came to me and he says, okay, now what do I do? And I can't help him. Distribution is a really difficult thing. There are distributors out there. They charge per unit to send it out. They have to package um, and spend the money on both packaging and postage. So you're not saving any money once you come around to what it really costs to distribute a book.
Right. So what I want to back up here about distribution is, actually, I want to ask you another question first, and then we'll
Okay.
talk about it because it's very important. What's the sense of putting all this time and money into a book and not having a distribution plan? It's really doesn't make sense. So we will
You'd
get back
be
to it.
surprised.
Right.
Yeah.
I know, because people don't see those parts. They don't
Right.
see the book cover just going on. They don't see that a book is designed with an anatomy. They don't see that it costs money to get that book in their hands
Right.
and a
Right.
plan. So it's a big deal. And it's
Yes, it
invisible
is.
to us. It's just like when we read a book, we don't see the years that the author put into it.
Yes.
And we shouldn't. It should look like
Right.
it
Right.
should look. and everything should look like it just is happening. But because of that, when it comes to producing our own and getting out there, we're at sea. We have no idea what it takes. And we think we're in a big sturdy ship, but we're really just in a life raft of some sort. And we
Good
try to do it
analogy.
ourselves. So
Yeah.
you call yourself two things, publishing partners, which is very obvious here what partners means, and that you do a really fine job of collaborating and thinking and sharing and ultimately having to accept some boneheaded decisions on the part of a writer. But you also call yourself a reader advocate, and that's kind of the tail end of our discussion with all that goes into designing a book.
Right. Good one. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, reader advocate is kind of what I do all the way through the process. If the book is difficult to read, if the design of the book doesn't flow easily, or the captions are not attached to the images, or there's all kinds of pitfalls that you can make that, and that's what I'm always watching for, is that it's going to be fun to read and there's no distraction with things like you'd be surprised, you hardly ever bold a word in a book. You don't see those very often, and I've had customers that send me things that everything is either bolded or in italics or in parentheses, and there's all this extra garbage, just
Right,
distraction. And that's part of what I try to take care of, is to get the book so that it's flowing, and it's for the reader. I'm not designing for the author, really. I'm designing for the reader, so
right,
the reader will enjoy that author's book.
right. I like that term. I like both of them, anatomy and the advocate for the reader. Really good. So we were about to go on to talk about distribution a little bit more.
Okay.
Um, I want to I would like to have clarity about the difference between Amazon as your fulfillment and distributor and a big one like Ingram, because you said there
Okay.
are lots of distributors around, and there's something called small press distribution, which is another task a writer would have to do, get accepted to have
Right.
them be their distributor. So that's a process too. And there are downfalls with everything, I think, but the two major ones. So that would
Oh,
require
yeah.
some careful
Yeah.
research, and we can talk about the pitfalls there. But what is the difference, first of all?
Well, but it's really simple. Amazon is a retailer, so they order the book and they sell the book to the end user, the reader, where Ingram sells their books to Barnes and Noble and other bookstores. So that the royalty is divided between Ingram and the bookstore, and you get what's left over, where Amazon gives you a bigger percent because there's nobody in the middle. Does that answer the
Well, when you say
question?
royalties, so there's two ways writers get royalties.
Right.
One is an upfront payment by usually a big press, like we've all heard of, and it's supposed to cover their expenses while they're writing, which unless you're Stephen King, it probably doesn't. Um, but it still feels good. And then once the publisher has sold enough books to make up that money, then your royalties start per
Right.
book, and it's
Right.
often very little. Although I have to say, there's a funny story that's in my memory bank here about a writer who came across an article that said that the publisher had now sold millions of copies, and his royalty statement never indicated that. So he went, of course, to the publisher and said, "What's up?" And they owed him a lot of money.
Oh,
Anyway,
well, that's
so
nice.
right, that was a nice ending. But for a lot of us who are getting royalties, first of all, they're small. Second of all, they're not paid that frequently, and they're always behind. They're always paid
Always.
up
Yeah.
from,
Yeah.
months before.
Yeah.
So that's a glitch there that a writer has to be prepared for. And in the Amazon situation, if you've self-published and are listing it through Amazon, or do you have to have published via Amazon? Like you upload the book to Amazon. Is that what you're saying to begin with?
Well, I upload the book directly to Amazon. Their portal is called KDP. So I upload the cover and the interior, fill in all the metadata, and then they have it on their website.
Okay, so what the writer is then getting directly from Amazon because you've created that
Right, right,
account.
right. I create that account, and the author pays me directly. I don't, and then once it's up, I'm out of the picture. I don't take a portion of royalties. And
Right.
I would, I think it's I always, I don't know how to say this. It's probably not an ethical company if they charge you to do the work and then also take a piece of the cut of the royalties. That's not
Right. You see
not
yourself as a
yeah.
service, not a public.
Right. Oh yeah, I'm a
Yeah,
consultant. You pay
right,
me by the
right,
hour and
right.
yeah.
Okay. So Amazon is able to send checks directly from KDP to your bank account, to a writer's
Right.
bank.
It's actually, yeah, it's a direct deposit. Yeah.
Yeah. And well, the writer gets a much larger percentage of the sale price,
Yeah.
right? Okay. Now, if you also have uploaded it to Ingram so that they do print on demand for bookstore orders, is that right?
Right. Right.
Okay. And that percentage then that the writer would get is less for a number of reasons. One is the distributor Ingram takes some money, and so
Sure.
does the bookstore.
Right.
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 But it's still higher than if you were with a what we're going to call legacy publisher, big publisher.
Yeah, I haven't had the experience yet. I'm hoping to have it soon.
Yeah,
I- but
it is.
yeah, that
It is.
you don't know
Yeah.
if you can get a publisher. It's really hard to first get the agent and then the agent to sell to a publisher, and then the publisher gives you a pretty small percent because supposedly they're doing a lot of marketing and they're doing, it's their
Yeah.
work. So
And
yeah,
there's
you get 60% from Amazon of the suggested retail,
mm,
and from Ingram you only get 45. So
yeah.
it's a big difference.
It's an even bigger difference than if you're published with a
Then you get 2 cents, right?
well, maybe 50. Depends on your book and your and the esteem of your work, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, so you've mentioned we've mentioned the cover, the inside, the distribution, and now we're talking about pitfalls. So one pitfall
Right.
is to
Right.
think you can do your own distribution, like the author who
Right.
said, "What do I do?" and
Right.
it's not selling, and didn't want to use the either Amazon or Ingram as a distributor because he thought he could do it better himself. Which I need to add, if you go into a bookstore and want them to carry your book, um, they will sometimes buy it from you, but most often they will ask you, can I get it through Ingram? Because that's how their bookkeeping works.
Yeah.
That's how they pay their bills.
Yeah.
That's their system. People don't want to create a new system just for your book. So that's another
That's
thing,
huge.
right?
Yeah.
Another thing
Yeah.
to remember.
Yeah.
Okay, any other pitfalls that you can be aware of?
We could talk about ebooks. There's
Okay.
a lot of pitfalls with ebooks. I have ordered and actually returned ebooks because they were so difficult to read. I didn't even want them in my ebook library. Um, you want to make sure that the fonts are correctly. Well, the big important thing is that when a reader opens a ebook, they can choose the font, they can choose the color, they can choose the margins. I mean, there's not any font they want, but they can pick from a number of fonts. They can pick from a number of colors. They can make the margins bigger or smaller. They can make the text really big, easy to read, which is what I do. So you want to make sure that it's very responsive. And if you don't design it correctly or lay it out correctly, it's going to be very difficult for the reader to read. So there's a lot of little nuances when it comes to ebooks.
Whew. Okay.
Like I said, a fire hose.
Right.
Drinking from
Right.
a fire hose.
So you talked about metadata,
Yeah.
and I think I know what that is, but this, whatever it is you're passing on to the distributors, what is that? What is metadata?
Went the ISBN, which I assign to the book.
Not only do
The
you sign it, you purchase them for your
right,
customers, right?
right, right.
Because not everyone knows what that is, but you see it on the back of the book, you see it by
Yeah,
the barcode,
yeah.
and it's something that does what besides make it more easily sold?
Well, it's how your book is identified in a library or in anywhere. It's not identified by the title or the author. It's identified by the ISBN, and the ISBN is in the barcode on the back. So when it's scanned into a sales system. It's the price is in there, the author, all the metadata that whatever I enter, the metadata is in there. It's the author name, the description of the book, the date of publication, ISBN, LCCN,
What's L,
my,
what's LCCN?
the Library of Congress number. Sorry. I try not to use
Yeah,
acronyms all the time.
that's okay.
And there could be a bio of the author in there and keywords, which we haven't talked about yet either. I put keywords in the metadata, both print and ebook, and those are designed to help a customer, a reader, find what they want. So if you have a book that the title is not clear what it's about, you want to put that in the keywords so it's supposedly the search engines can more easily find it. So
Okay, that's a lot of work right there. It seems as we talk that having a partner in this not only means you're offloading work to that partner, but it also means you've got somebody to lean on in terms of getting all this knowledge and having it happen. So again, the word collaboration is a really important one. It's you don't do these things mysteriously. Your clients know that you're doing them.
Yeah, well, and what's important is I would rather be writing than learning. I mean, if as a writer, I understand I'd be, I'd rather be writing than learning what metadata is or how to do all these things. And what I want my book to look as good as I can. So it takes a lot of time. I can tell you, it takes a lot of time to
Right,
learn
but
all this
luckily
stuff.
you've been doing it for years, and
I've been,
therefore
yes.
you are getting faster, and it takes less time than
Yeah. Oh, way. Yeah.
if
Yeah.
I did it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we've covered quite a bit, and I know we could move towards marketing. And the role you can play in marketing is probably if an author does not yet have a website, do you help them get a
Yeah.
website?
I can design a website. I design my own, and it's expensive is the problem, but I'm happy to do a website for anybody that wants me to do it.
It is really imperative that a writer have a website.
I think
Because
so. Yeah.
because anywhere, even your author page on Amazon can have a link to know more about you, which builds your credibility. Anyone who wants to advertise your book on their site needs
Yes. Yes.
they could just go to Amazon, but an author website improves a person's credibility as an author. And it allows you to stay in touch with your readers. It can have a blog associated with it.
Mhm.
It can share information. Some people do this all through a Facebook page. That's possible
And
too. Yeah,
that's not a bad thing. Those are, but I still think you need a website.
yeah. It's a website,
Depending on the book too,
right?
especially nonfiction, you need a website.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your website can borrow from other people's in terms of posting information that your readers would also like, which means those people will post information
Right.
that their
Right.
readers and participants will
Right.
also like.
Right.
So it's a huge world out there. And
It
I
is,
think
and
the book,
publishing is huge. Yeah.
right. So, I always do a book
Oh,
dance when I feel like finished a book. And then when someone takes it, I'm excited. But then I remember very shortly after that, the work is not done.
no, it's never. Yeah, it's like everything else. Work is
Yeah.
never done.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the author page, and we didn't talk about that, but something else I do for the customers is set up an author page, which if you're in Amazon and you click on the author's name, it'll go to the author's page, and there you can provide additional information about your book or about yourself, or you can actually attach it to your blog. There's all kinds of things you can do with that.
So,
And you want to make sure you've got an author page.
right. And so how do you help people with their author page?
It's actually not that hard to do. You just log into the KDP account and, or to Amazon's, what do they call it? Their author, Author Central. They call it Author Central. And you log into Author Central and you bring up your own book and then attach yourself to your book. And then there's a process. You have to wait a day or two before they approve it, and then you can upload all kinds of information in there. And that's what I do.
Right. Thank you, because some of us would feel that that's a burden. It's incredibly hard to write about yourself. And
Yes.
and so sometimes having a partner in that is very useful too. So it's good that you have a menu of services, and it's good that people can decide later, like, oh, Marcia, I really should have had you upload it to Ingram, or oh, Marcia, I hate writing this author page. And so maybe if you get a little,
Yeah.
right, you get a
Yeah.
little cash from your book, you might respend it on making your life easier.
Well, in terms of the a la carte, I'm happy if a customer comes to me and says, I did the whole thing, I just can't do the cover. I'll do the cover. One thing that's really difficult is that back pay or the back cover of the book or the book description in Amazon. Those are hard to write. And sometimes I can help clean those up. Since I'm a writer too, I can help
Uh-huh.
make those more powerful if you want me to.
So
That's it. Like I said, it's a fire hose. There's so many little nuances that make a difference. And that's what I help with. But if you just want one thing, I'm happy to do that.
okay. And also, you said since you're a writer, you can help with copy. I know you also help with editing, if
I
that's
do. I'm not, I do. I kind of became an editor by accident, as I'm reading somebody's novel, or as I'm designing somebody's novel or whatever, those pop out at me. I see the edits that, the misspelled words or punctuation or whatever. So I always point those out. And I read so much that whenever I read a book that's got poor editing in it, it drives me crazy. So I really encourage my customers to either hire an editor before they come to me, or let me at least read it through. I'm charged for that, but read it through and make sure it doesn't have a lot of edits. And
right.
then I have also done some, what do you call it? Content editing to help. Um, I had one customer that was English was a foreign language, so I helped him write it in readable English. And then he also did a lot of repetition in each chapter. So I made sure that, if he was talking about a place or a thing that it was duplicate, then we made sure that I helped them get those out of there. It was fun. I had a great time
Yeah.
doing that one.
So I think people really need to hear the different kinds of editing that go on.
Yes, yes,
Sometimes they're different people. So a copy editor was the first one you're talking about. You do some copy editing, and that will have to do with punctuation and word choice and spelling and formatting in terms of where the paragraphs go and things
right.
like that. Or have you forgotten to put conversation in quotes, or have you forgotten an end quote or an opening quote, or have you put single quotes? That's one of my pet peeves when
Oh
people say
yeah, yeah.
single quotes uh, over words they want to emphasize. And I find that just confusing and beside the point. You use, in my way, old school maybe, way of doing things, you put double quotes unless you are quoting inside the quote,
Double quotes.
right?
Yeah, right.
And also, I don't know how much we need things like triple exclamation points, or most of the time we don't even need an exclamation point.
Right,
Our
right.
writing should make the writer feel that way, right?
Those are
Uh,
startling.
yeah,
That's
right,
like bolded words. It's distracting and
right,
startling.
right.
Yeah,
And sometimes, people use a lot of foreign words for some manuscripts. I prefer that foreign words be italicized, which
right,
is the rule.
right,
And I don't care how many times they're italicized. I still know they're a foreign word. And
right.
I can either go to a glossary they might have in their book to find out what it means, or look it up, or think I got the meaning from content. It's
But you know
later.
what's really cool? If you're reading in an ebook, all you have to do is touch the word and it
That
tells
is
you what
really
it
cool.
means.
All
I
right.
love
You
that.
might convert me with that one thing. You might
I
convert.
love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So, uh, I don't know what else we might talk about. Is there something else you want to
I
add?
think we've really covered it. I think the a la carte thing is real important. I'm happy to do what just to cover just the interior or
Right,
the whole shebang.
right.
And I love doing it. So that's Marcia at marciabreeze.com.
All right. And I know that people get in touch with you via email, which is on your
Right.
website, but we'll put it in the title card. And also that once they've contacted you and want your help, you have a form and where
Yeah.
they can fill in more information about what
Right.
they need.
right. That's the first step that I have if they want me to do the whole book, or well, whatever they want me to do. I ask for the the contact name, which isn't always the author name. Sometimes they have a nom plume, an address, all the banking information so I can set up the account on Amazon and Ingram.
And by that,
And
you mean where they want the money deposited.
right, right, the deposit, right,
Yeah.
right. And what else is on there, whether or not they want an ebook, what trim size they want, and all of that sometimes just leads to conversations. Maybe they don't know what trim size they need, or if they want black and white or color, if they want a matte or glossy cover. So I've got it all on one form so we can go over that and make decisions
Very organized.
before I get started. Yeah.
Right. So I just want to add, listening to you about bank accounts in this day and age where there's so much fraud going on. Um, my my accounts with Amazon, which are for about 3 books now that I've done through Writing It Real, um, go directly to my business account. So they're not connected to my personal account. And I want to remind writers that if you're collecting money for your writing, you probably are owed a tax deduction as a business. So
Ah, yeah, I never thought
you
of that.
might want to open a separate account that's just your business as a writer.
Right.
And keep those accounts separate. Then you'll feel more protected with sharing it with distributors or whoever. But also you might investigate what qualifies you to declare a home office, for instance, or some writing expenses, the research, the trip you had to take, the ways in which you had to find people to talk to for research, whatever. So it's lucrative in that way. We haven't even discussed that. And maybe knowing that will help people splurge if they consider it a splurge and get the help they need to make a really handsome book.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I very much want to thank you for your time today with us.
Oh,
And
my pleasure. I loved it.
yeah,
Thank
yeah, I
you.
can tell. And that's why it's so much fun to work with you. And I can personally attest to the fact that I have never felt criticized by anything you've ever said about an idea I might have.
Oh,
And I've
good.
always felt open to what you're saying. Even, Marcia, when you were doing the work for Exophidia and you said, we have an extra blank page. Do you have another poem? And I was like, what are you talking about? This book has been done for at least 2 years now, or maybe my most recent revision was 6 months ago. Another poem for this particular book.
I
And I
know.
thought,
Well,
but she's right. There's a blank page and I don't want to take another poem out. So what do I do? And I will just tell our listeners, I went to my book of unfinished poems, my box of
is
unfinished
that what you
poems,
did? Yeah.
exactly what I did. And I pulled things out and I went, I couldn't finish that then, but I can finish that now. It was a very short poem, but
It
it
was
took me,
beautiful too. I
thank
remember.
you, it took
Yes.
me at least a month to get the next 2 lines right.
And we
But
really worked on those, didn't we? I
yes,
mean, it was,
I would send you something and I would know it wasn't right. I'd send it to the publisher. I knew it wasn't right, but I felt like I was a little bit under pressure. But my husband stepped in and he said, this is not how you usually write. You don't sound that way. So really getting someone
oh,
else
cool.
to hear,
That's great.
right. Even, and so I was able to rewrite it. But the 2 lines, that's all it was. It's 2 lines. But what I'm telling this for is that Marcia's help, your help has been so wonderful in so many ways, and that it can be replicated by writers who may want others to have a say. I mean, a trusted person, not just everybody. Don't do it by committee. But if you're not sure, you can have another person to ask. Whether, for me, it was a small publisher and you. And then finally, in desperation, it was my husband. Like, I can't do this. Why can't I do this? But, writing is collaborative at certain stages. And I just want to
Yeah.
remind
Yeah.
people that there is absolutely, these days, no shame in self-publishing, none at
Oh,
all.
not at all.
Right.
Yeah.
But you need to do it right.
Right.
So
Right.
brace yourselves and do it right is my
Yeah.
message. All right. And along with that, before we end, because I hate ending talking to you, but before we end, I want to say, you mentioned it slightly. There are a lot of people who advertise to do what you do, including companies. And it's very important to make sure that they're going to do the quality work they're advertising. They usually advertise a big rate. They usually advertise that they'll market, they'll this, they'll that. Well, need to see who they've published, what those books look like, perhaps get in touch with the author of that book if you can. It should be pretty
Yeah.
easy online, and do the research you can till you feel really solid. So I'm here as a spokesperson telling people listening that I found you, and through 4 books now, I feel that your help is reasonably priced and really profoundly professional and well thought out. So with that, now I will say a formal goodbye and thank you very much for being
Thank you,
here.
Sheila. I loved it.
All right.